and welcome to your daily mobile gaming sizzle with me, Jon Jordan. Two charts to look at today, and it all revolves around US mobile developer MZ, previously known as Machine Zone. So well known as one of the top grossing mobile game developers in the world. Currently has 3 games in the market. The first one released was Game of War, released in 2013. That was followed by Mobile Strike in 2015, and this year we've seen Final Fantasy 15, which is a kind of co-production, a license with Square Enix, the Japanese company behind the Final Fantasy games. But what's happened has been quite remarkable, particularly since July. So 2 graphs here. This first one we're looking at is the most downloaded games on Google Play in the US. So we've chosen Google Play just because it makes things a bit simpler than the Apple App Store chart, but the same trend has happened. So in red we can see Game of War's download. So until April it was a top 50 most downloaded game, and then it kind of dropped down a little bit to top 100. It got to July, we'll talk about that later. And same thing with Mobile Strike, that's the blue line, that's the newer game. That's the game, if you can see the icon fronted by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was the kind of character in the game and famously used for their adverts for the game, Super Bowl adverts. One of the famous things that MZ has done. So MZ has spent a lot of money on what we call user acquisition. So that's a kind of technical term of marketing your mobile games, but has also spent a lot of money on pure marketing. So it's done Super Bowl ads, it's done a lot of TV ads. Interestingly, it's one of the first mobile companies to get involved with kind of celebrity advertising. So Arnie Schwarzenegger was playing this kind of general character in the lot of the advertising for Mobile Strike, and the Game of War. They had Kate Upton, the kind of model, and various other people have taken over from her, Mariah Carey as well. So they've had real life people really pushing these games. So they've spent a lot of money on advertising. That's kept these games in the download charts, say, for years. So Game of War 2013, Mobile Strike in 2015. So what happened in July? We can see basically at the start of July, MZ switches off all the advertising for those 2 games, and they drop like a stone. So pretty much he switches off straight out the top 100. People are not downloading those games anymore. Why is that happening? Well, we can clearly see here, the end of June, start of July was when Final Fantasy 15 was released. So we can see that starts off, that's the most downloaded game for a few days, and it's kind of dropped down a little bit, but generally stayed within the top 50 most downloaded games on Google Play in the US, same on the App Store. So one obvious kind of thing to learn from this is MZ has switched off its advertising for 2 older games and put all that advertising, or at least some of that advertising, towards its newer game. I mean, that kind of, to some degree, makes sense because the newer game is actually a more appealing game. So Game of War and Mobile Strike are 2 games that MZ has kind of come up with of its own accord. There's no licensing involved. Final Fantasy, lots of people have played the mobile version, at least, is not a Final Fantasy type game, as anyone who's played Final Fantasy games on console would understand. It's very much the same sort of game, what we call in the industry a 4X strategy game, very hardcore. It's all really about guilds and alliances and doing things together and spending money to get the most resources in the game, and fighting other alliances or fighting other kind of big bosses in the game. So not really a Final Fantasy experience as we would understand it, but definitely having that IP, having that license is very valuable for MZ and makes the game a lot more accessible. Perhaps it also means it's not spending so much money on marketing, because people in the App Store will see a Final Fantasy game and go, oh, I like Final Fantasy, I'll try that. So that might be one of the interesting things, slightly speculative on my part, but I think Final Fantasy 15 is a more efficient game to market in terms of the money that MZ can bring in. And we'll go and look at the top grossing chart now so you can see what I mean. So moving on to the top grossing chart. Quite similar trends as you'd expect. Again, this is the Google Play top grossing game chart for the US. Similar thing on the Apple App Store, but just easy to show on Google Play. So, if we look at Game of War, which again is the red line, and Mobile Strike, the blue line. So until the end of June, they sat in the top 5 top grossing game positions. You can see they move up and down a little bit, but we can see that marketing money MZ was spending. It's really working. It's bringing in new players, people who obviously been playing it for a long period of time as well. They're spending in that game, and it's very high in the charts, making a lot of money, at least in gross terms. Then what happens, if you look at the red and the blue lines, after the marketing is switched off, those lines start to drop. I mean, that's kind of to be expected, because you're not bringing new players into the game. But it doesn't change that much, partly because you have players who've been playing those games for years, months and years, and they're already spending. These are games where you really have to spend quite a lot of money to keep competitive. So there's not a cataclysmic drop like there was on the download chart. So they drop from the top 5, they go into the top 10, and really we're looking, October seems to be the point at which something really changes. Now, whether that is things within the game, whether the games aren't being updated anymore, whether MZ is trying to cross-promote its new game, Final Fantasy 15, and get players and guilds out of those old games into the new game, we're not sure. But we can definitely see there's a big change in terms of the revenue you're generating if you're in the top 5 top grossing games, and if you're in the top 30, which is what those games are now. And it wouldn't be surprised, we're at the end of November now, if you look at how they're dropping, those games could be outside the top 50 by the end of the year, which would be a massive change. Now, some people are kind of looking at that with a bit of kind of schadenfreude and saying, well, these games weren't very good anyway. It was only marketing that was keeping them at the top spot. That's not the case. Lots of people don't like those games because they are very hardcore, and you basically have to be in an alliance or guild to get the most out of them. That's not to say the people who aren't spending all this money in these games are not enjoying it. I don't believe people spend a lot of money in games if they're not gaining some sort of enjoyment. But these are not games with beautiful graphics and lovely gameplay. These are heavily metagame focused experiences. So let's look now at Final Fantasy 15. So that's the green line. Up it pops, so it's released at the end of June, start of July. So it's pretty much straight into the top 30, so people are downloading and spending. And we see kind of, the start of October is this kind of pivot point where the 2 older games are dropping off and the new game is rising up the chart. And we can kind of see now Final Fantasy 15 is not quite at the level where it's a top 5 top grossing game, but it's going to be there, It's pretty much gone straight up into that chart. And you have to remember, when you get to the top 10 top grossing games in the States, these are games making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. People are spending a lot of money on user acquisition and marketing to keep them there. They have very big fan bases spending money. It's really hard to break into the top 10 top grossing. So we see that the Final Fantasy has done that, I'd say, fairly easily. Obviously, looking at the previous graph, MZ is spending money, and if you play free-to-play mobile games, you will find a lot of adverts for Final Fantasy 15 in those games, so it's not like it's not being marketed. But my supposition is that actually, as a newer game, and as a game with a better IP, a better license, a more attractive license, Final Fantasy 15 is just a more efficient way of making money for MZ. So it's spending less on marketing, and what looks like it will be another billion-dollar annual game for MZ. Obviously, it has to share some money with Square Enix. But I kind of think overall, what appears to me at least, is that Final Fantasy 15 is just a more efficient way for MZ to make profit than those other games were. Because the one thing we really don't know about MZ's operations are what's its profit margin. So in general, it's a very rough rule of thumb. A lot of consumer companies spend about 30% of their revenue on marketing. It could be different types of marketing, but that's a rough rule of thumb. We don't know. MZ could have been spending 50% of its revenue on marketing, perhaps more. Who knows? Obviously, the difference of 20% is a very big difference in terms of your profitability. So MZ might even be the case where MZ, because it's these 2 games, Mobile Strike and Game of War, it stopped marketing them. They're going to drop like a stone. Maybe its revenue will decline a lot, but its profitability might actually increase. And really, when you're running a company, revenue is nice. You don't necessarily want to see revenue dropping without good cause, but what you really care about is profitability, because profitability is the free money you're creating to do other things with. That's a better idea of the efficiency of the company. And my gut feeling here is that MZ has just worked out, certainly with Game of War now, it's an old game. It was released in 2013, and now it has, Final Fantasy 15, a much more attractive game, a game it can market much better and on a more profitable basis, and that's what it's looking for going forward. I guess the one thing to look out for is, what will MZ's next game be? Will it be another kind of internally developed IP, like a Game of War or a Mobile Strike, or will it start working now with other games companies that have these well-known global IPs that are just more efficient for it to plug into its technology system, its marketing system, and make money off of? Because I don't believe any games company in the world would turn down MZ if MZ said, could I make a game using your license? Well, maybe Nintendo. Maybe Nintendo would turn it down, but not many companies would turn down MZ if they said, you can give me this license and I can generate $1 billion of revenue from it, and you can get a 10% cut of that effectively for nothing. So there we go, two charts looking at the ever-changing mobile games industry. It really is, we think it gets static, and it really doesn't. It's always dynamic. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you like what you see. Don't forget to subscribe. We like doing videos about mobile games and the general games industry as well. We like looking at data in particular, so if that's your thing, don't forget to subscribe. But thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon.